I'm not sure.
You don't know for
I
sure?
don't know for sure, but it certainly goes a few hundred years
Okay, so this was part of the traditional world and the
of the Lithuanian world,
uh-huh,
or Lithuanian Jewish world, of
all the
course.
way back.
Yes, it goes back a few hundred years, for sure,
hmm
for
Um,
sure.
it's interesting that the other areas didn't have as strong a yeshiva system.
Well, there was, of course, there was. Poland had, obviously, Poland with the largest Jewish community,
hmm
the real Poland. But Poland had another. We can talk about it if you want.
Go ahead.
You have it rolling? Is it
Not
rolling?
yet, but we can. You're ready, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to
No.
talk briefly about
Yeah.
the distinction.
Well, the
between-
distinction. You see, as I mentioned to you, in Lithuania, the demand was depth. The demand was intelligent. And so the Lithuanian Jews always regarded themselves as higher than, say, the regular Polish Jews. The regular Polish Jews were mostly Hasidic. And their life and economic life was very difficult in the Städtlach. And so there were not too many people who studied for a long time in yeshivas. They did not have too many of them. So that's why the Hasidic movement was so successful in taking root in Poland more than in Lithuania. There were hardly any Hasidim in Lithuania. They were, as a matter of fact, the Gaon of Vilna was anti-Hasidic. And they were known to be anti-Hasidic because they thought that they were creating some kind of a new religion, whilst Hasidism came and made every simple Jew feel good. Even if he had hardly any knowledge, he was just about able to read from the Siddur, from the prayer book. But they came to the Rebbe and they sang, and the Rebbe encouraged them and made them feel good in their struggle in life. So that's why the yeshivas in Poland were more Hasidic yeshivas. They did study and they did learn, with perhaps the exception in Lublin. Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin was very known all over the world because it had the system of the Lithuanian studying in Lublin. In other places, it was more with Hasidism and with singing and with making the soul, giving the soul an uplift to the simple person. You go to Hungary. Hungary, of course, had yeshiva, but it was already different. German Jews were more scientific already, were more elegant. Yes, they studied, but they had seminaries of studies. It was already connected with getting doctorates in philosophy maybe. Go to other places, it was less. Everybody knew that in order to study real Talmud, real Torah, there was one place, and that was Lithuania. And so, and who did not come to Vilna? Vilna was, in the time of the Gaon, or after that, he left all his disciples there, and who continued his system of studying the Torah. Of course, today the distinction that existed at that time between the Lithuanian Jews and the Hasidic Jews, or the Mitnagdim and the Hasidic Jews, today it's, of course, if you go today in Jerusalem, or you go to Brisk Yeshiva, or you go to Ponevezh in Bnei Brak Yeshiva, or to Slobodka Yeshiva, or to the Mir Yeshiva, or some of these other yeshivas, yes, they say, we are Lithuanians. They're already Israeli born. They are not Lithuanian. But when you listen to some of them speak Yiddish, they still speak with a Lithuanian accent. If you go to a Hasidic yeshiva, to the Bobove Hasidim or Satmare Hasidim, or not Lubavitch, because Lubavitch speaks Russian Yiddish, very similar to the Lithuanian. But the other Hasidic, they speak, of course, in the Hungarian, Galician, Polish Yiddish, and it's amazing. You know, my late father came from Poland, from a little town called Pultusk, and of course he learned in yeshiva there, but it was the minimum, because they were poor people, and they worked from morning to night, and my grandfather, by the time it came to 9 o'clock at night, he was very tired, and so how much could he study? And so with my father, but so I learned Yiddish to speak the Polish-Hungarian way. It was only when I came to South Africa, to Johannesburg, that I adopted the Lithuanian accent. And in no time, of course, I switched, and today I speak the Lithuanian Yiddish so beautifully. So each time I come to Vilna, and I still have the old Vilna Jews or Kovna Jews or the other places, they always ask me, wie zei kennt ihr reden as a gute Litwische Yiddish? So I told them that in South Africa I got spoiled. And I learned it. But I have no problem speaking the Polish, the Hungarian. So it depends who I get together with. It's no problem for me.
Talk a little bit about the connection of Vilna to the yeshiva system, because most of the yeshivas were not in Vilna. The Ramailis yeshiva was in Vilna, but I think that's the only one of the larger yeshivas that was in Vilna, and even that was not as important in later years. But if I remember, Chaim Oizer was in Vilna.
Of course.
Can you talk about Chaim Oizer's connection to the yeshiva system? Do you know anything about that, or his standing within that world?
Look, you see, Reb Chaim Oizer was the Vilna Rov. You know, in the system of Torah life, you had the Rov, and you had the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva. It was the head of the yeshiva who spent all his time in studying the Torah, not necessarily in issuing rulings, religious rulings towards the community. It was the Rov of the Shtort, of the town, who you went to ask a shaila, to ask a question, a problem, to try to resolve it. And he had to be both a Talmudic scholar, but a man who had the contact with the people and understanding the people and trying to find within the Talmudic system a solution, even if it may not have been accepted to the Rosh Yeshiva. But it was always within the realm of Talmudic studies. Now, usually in the old towns, every Shtort Rov was also Rosh Yeshiva. He always made it his business immediately to establish a yeshiva, because that's where he made an impact as far as the study was concerned. So was Chaim Oizer. And but being that he was the Shtort Rov, he didn't have enough time, to spend all the time in the yeshiva. So maybe he came once or twice to check the boys, but otherwise he first of all had himself to study. When you become a rabbi, that doesn't mean to say that you stop. You really begin then, because it is at that time when you begin to be confronted with communal issues, and then you look to the Talmud to give Talmud or all the other interpreters of the Talmud to give you solutions. And then, if you have a great mind, you go to Maimonides, you go to Rashi, and you look to see what if they were confronted, or some suggestions. You put things together, and you create a conception, a new conception. And so I would say that because Vilna, you see, most of the yeshivas, as you say, were not necessarily in Vilna, because in a large city to have a yeshiva, it's very difficult. There are too many attractions to the yeshiva boys. I know for even today, if you send your son to study in Jerusalem in a yeshiva, it's wonderful. There are wonderful yeshivas there, but you have attractions there. They can go to meet these kind of people. They can see another yeshiva. And they said, no. We want, if you come to study with us, your life is with the yeshiva. And so, hence, the creation of yeshivas in smaller places, because there were no attractions there, no attractions. They were busy, as we say, yomam v'agita bo yomam v'layla. You study the Torah day and night. There was nowhere else to go, other than to eat somewhere at somebody's home, to study and to go to sleep for 2-3 hours a night. That's all.
And 2-3 hours a night is accurate.
It sure was.
They worked all day long.
Of course. They were studying and studying and studying all the time. And, you know, going back to the cantorial world, in those years, you could not be a first-class chazan, cantor, without having a profound Talmudic knowledge. All these cantors went to yeshivas. They all studied in the yeshiva. Because in the yeshiva, you did not only gain knowledge, you gained what we call a Weltanschau. Hashkafat olam, you got an attitude to life in the world. Even if you did not remain a typical yeshiva boy, but so much is left in you that you can use, because to be a cantor is not just to go to the synagogue and sing. You have to know the laws and customs. You have to know the Talmud. You have to know Hebrew. You have to know music. You have to have a good voice. You have to know the nusach, that the traditional musical modes of chanting the prayers. And you have to have the talent to develop and to embellish, to improvise. The idea of improvisation in cantorial music is a very important component. And all these cantors whose names I mentioned to you before were great improvisers. And that can only come as a result of deep religious convictions. And the religious convictions, of course, you get at home, but you get also at the yeshiva. It was a unique partnership between the home and the yeshiva, the father and mother, and the Rosh Yeshiva and the Rebbe in the yeshiva. That unique partnership only exists in Judaism because these people molded the person and prepared him for life, especially in the Lithuanian way. Because in Lithuania, as we mentioned before, you had all kinds of schools. I'm talking about the non-yeshiva world. Yiddish, Hebrew. I mean, every Lithuanian Jew spoke Hebrew. Every Lithuanian Jew obviously spoke Yiddish. You went to Budapest, typically in Budapest, and they did not speak Yiddish. Not all of them, many did. They spoke Hungarian, or maybe some German, but Yiddish, the source was in Lithuania, and Yiddish. They say that the ideal, the correct Yiddish is the Lithuanian Yiddish. Now, I'm not the greatest expert on it, but I read a lot of Yiddish, and again, a lot of Yiddish songs, folklore songs, were composed based on the music in the yeshiva. So you have here a very interesting circle between Yiddish songs, yeshiva, Talmudic studied songs, and the synagogue music. And one drew from the other. And so you have a lot of Yiddish songs where the motifs are yeshiva study. You have synagogue songs with the motifs from the study. Then Yiddish took from the synagogue, and synagogue took from Yiddish. And I suppose, as I mentioned before, because of this close-knit type of a community, it was not too big, but it was big enough to have every shadow of opinion. I think that probably created that uniqueness of Vilna.
Terrific. I think, have we missed anything?
I don't think so.
I think we've done a bit about how the Cantors went out, and how the yeshivas still exist. But is there a simple way to address what the influence of that world is today, and
Yeah.
you know how it continues to exist in the Jewish spirit, if you will?
Yeah.
Are we ready?
Are we ready?
Okay. Yeah.
You know, we are talking that about the uniqueness of life, of Jewish life, synagogue life, music life, yeshiva life, Yiddish life, and it is evident today too. First of all, you have mainly in Israel, but you have it here in the United States also, especially in Brooklyn. You still have the Mir Yeshiva. You still have the Slobodka Yeshiva. You still have Brisk Yeshiva in Jerusalem today, with the same method and system of studying the Talmud. And as I mentioned, that's why they call themselves the Lithuanian Jewish community, although they are not Lithuanian, but they say, Ich bin a Litwischer. Mein Gang in Leben is a Litwischer. My way of life is a Litwischer way of life. As opposed to, Ich bin a Hasidischer Yid. I'm a Chassid, and my way is a Hasidic way of life. So, and then in the more modern yeshivas, both in Israel and the United States, because it is really today Israel and the United States which are the centers. Israel is tops, and of course the United States is outstanding. But the system was adopted, most of the yeshivas today, whether it's Yeshiva University in New York, or the Bnei Akiva yeshivot, the younger type of yeshivot in Israel, or the Hesder yeshivot, the yeshivot where in Israel you have a combination of serving in the army, doing your duty for the country, and studying the Talmud. I would say that most of it, the system is really the Lithuanian system of studying the Talmud. Now, Rav Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, came, of course, from Eastern Europe. He had the unique combination of one of the greatest Talmudic minds, but he was a Kabbalist also. He was a mystic. You only have to read his poems or some of the melodies that he used to sing to feel that that was a holy person of an unparalleled nature. And he created Yeshivat Merkaz Harav in Jerusalem. Now you walk in there, the system is a Lithuanian system. You see, the Gaon of Vilna had full intentions of getting out of Lithuania and moving to Jerusalem. He sent a lot of his disciples to Jerusalem, which at that time, the majority of Jews there were Sephardic Jews. And then he already left Lithuania. He left Vilna on his way to Jerusalem, and somewhere he stopped and returned to Vilna. There are many legends about it. I don't want to go into that, why he did it. I think nobody would ever know. But his disciples came to Jerusalem and brought with them the system of studying the Talmud. They also brought with them the nusach, the chanting of prayers that from Lithuania. And today you have what's called Nusach Yerushalayim, both on the Sfaradim, but they have their own, it's different motifs. And you have Nusach Yerushalayim of the Ashkenazic Jews. And when you analyze it, it is 100%, of course, traditional, but very much Lithuanian. My own Rebbe, Shlomo Ravitz, was Latvian, Ukrainian, but he visited Vilna all the time. There was that close-knit connections and one getting from the other. In Jerusalem, you had the Rivlin family, and Shlomo Zalman Rivlin, who was a real Litvak. He was a real Gaon of Vilna, I think he was even a descendant of the Gaon of Vilna. You had Yehuda Leib Neeman, who was teaching cantorial music in Yerushalayim, who was a typical Litvische Yid. That when you spoke to him Yiddish, you spoke to him, you thought you were in Vilna. It was wonderful. And my Rebbe in Tel Aviv, Shlomo Rabitz, also spoke the Lithuanian accent. But to us, of course, he spoke Hebrew, because we grew up on Hebrew. But I always listened to it. I was, as a kid, fascinated by it. My late father used to tell me a lot, although he never was in Vilna. But he knew so much about it, he used to tell me things about it. And I always yearned and yearned to go to Vilna. Now, Yeshiva University here in New York, the Talmudic study is a Lithuanian, is Brisk, specifically Brisk because Rabbi Soloveitchik came from Brisk, and it's known as Shitat Brisk, the system of Brisk of study. The Talmud, which is the Lithuanian way of deep analysis. And so the system of Talmudic study is well and alive all over the world. And since today we live in a time where people want to study the Talmud all the time, there is such a keen interest, whether you want to study it because you want to form a way of life, or whether you want it as just an intellectual exercise. As far as I'm concerned, I couldn't care. Whatever as long as if you are interested, study it, because it's good for your mind, and it's good also to maintain that link of Jewish life, the chain of generations. And so it's wonderful that the Lithuanian system of studying the Talmud took root in the two centers in Israel and in New York, specifically New York, but there are other places too. And so one can say Lithuanian study of Talmud, study of Jewish life, the Lithuanian Jewish music, the Yiddish songs are well and alive.
Thank you very much.
Well, can we just get a room tone? Just
Sure.
rolling there?
Still rolling. Everybody just be quiet for 30 seconds. Or anything.
Room tone. Watch your head when you stand up there.
What does